Before we get into the garden side of this, a quick note. This video is about growing food at home, not about when or how to introduce specific foods to your baby. Every child is different, and all feeding decisions should be made in conversation with your pediatrician. What I can tell you is how to grow food that tastes extraordinary. The rest is between you and your doctor. There is a specific kind of satisfaction that happens the first time you hand your baby a piece of food that you grew yourself. Not bought, not processed, not shipped from a farm 1,000 miles away in a condition that required preservatives and cold chain management to survive the journey. Just something you planted, tended, harvested, and handed directly to the small person sitting in front of you, whose entire relationship with food is being formed in these first months of eating. The expression on a baby's face when they encounter the flavor of a genuinely fresh, genuinely ripe, just picked strawberry for the first time, still warm from the sun, with a sweetness and intensity that a grocery store strawberry can never achieve because it was picked before it was ripe to survive shipping, is something that parents who grow their own food talk about for years afterward. This video is about the growing side of that experience. Which crops are the easiest and most rewarding to grow at home for the parents of babies and toddlers who are beginning to explore food? How to grow them in small spaces, in containers, in raised beds, in whatever outdoor space you have available. And why growing even a small portion of your baby's early food experience at home changes that experience in ways that go far beyond nutrition. As always, follow your pediatrician's guidance on when and how to introduce specific foods to your baby. Every child is different, and the timing and method of food introduction is a conversation for you and your doctor, not your garden. What I can tell you is how to grow the food. The rest is between you and your pediatrician. These are the 12 crops that make the most sense to grow at home for families with babies and young children, chosen for ease of growing, reliability of production, exceptional flavor quality compared to store-bought equivalents, and the particular joy they bring to the experience of a baby or toddler encountering real food grown by their own family. Number 1 is the strawberry. And there is no better starting point for a baby-focused food garden than this one, because the gap between a homegrown strawberry and a grocery store strawberry is wider than the gap for almost any other commonly grown food. A commercial strawberry is picked at roughly 70% ripeness to survive the 5 to 7 days between harvest and your refrigerator, which means the sugars have not fully developed, and the flavor compounds that give a ripe strawberry its extraordinary fragrance and complexity have not yet formed. A homegrown strawberry picked at full ripeness, when the entire fruit is deep red to the center and the fragrance hits you from a foot away, is a completely different food. And for a baby or toddler whose relationship with sweetness and flavor is being formed in these first encounters with solid food, the difference between these two experiences is genuinely significant. Alpine strawberries, Fragaria vesca, are the best variety for a baby and toddler garden because they produce continuously from early summer through autumn rather than in a single concentrated harvest like standard garden strawberries, giving your baby a daily supply of small, intensely flavored berries throughout the warm season. They grow happily in containers, in hanging baskets, along the edges of raised beds, and in the partial shade under taller plants where standard strawberries would underperform. They require almost no care beyond regular watering and occasional feeding, and they produce fruit at exactly the height and in exactly the quantity that a crawling or walking toddler can discover and harvest independently, which adds the developmental dimension of self-directed food discovery that makes the garden experience so much richer than simply being handed food. Number 2 is the pea, and specifically the sugar snap pea, which is the single most toddler-friendly vegetable in the home garden, because it is eaten whole, pod and all, straight from the vine with no preparation required. The sugar snap pea has a sweetness when eaten fresh from the garden that bears essentially no relationship to the frozen peas that most children encounter as their first green vegetable, because the sugars in a fresh pea begin converting to starch within hours of harvest, and a pea that has been frozen, transported, and thawed has lost the fresh sweetness entirely. A pea eaten within minutes of being picked from a vine in your own garden is a completely different food from a frozen pea, and for a toddler learning that green vegetables are something to seek out rather than avoid, This difference in flavor experience can establish a positive relationship with vegetables that lasts for years. Grow sugar snap peas on a simple trellis of bamboo canes and garden twine in any sunny position. They are a cool season crop that grows best in spring and autumn, when temperatures are between 45 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, making them one of the first food crops available in the spring garden and one of the last in autumn. The act of picking peas directly from the vine is one of the most naturally engaging garden activities for toddlers, because the pods are easy to spot, satisfying to pick, and immediately edible with no processing. A toddler who can walk to the pea trellis every morning and pick their own breakfast peas is developing a relationship with food growing that no educational program or book can replicate. Number 3 is the cherry tomato, and the cherry tomato earns its place on this list specifically because of size. Standard tomatoes require cutting before they can be offered to young children, and the cutting removes the child from the direct growing to eating experience that makes the garden so powerful for early food relationships. A cherry tomato picked directly from the vine and eaten whole, with supervision and with attention to the age-appropriate texture guidance your pediatrician provides, is a completely self-contained, growing-to-eating experience that a toddler can participate in from the moment of harvest. The flavor of a homegrown cherry tomato ripened on the vine in full sun is so dramatically superior to any store-bought cherry tomato that parents who grow them for the first time consistently report that their children who previously refused tomatoes eat homegrown cherry tomatoes enthusiastically. This is not coincidence. The flavor of a vine-ripened cherry tomato is genuinely different from a commercially produced one, because commercial tomatoes are bred for shelf life and uniformity rather than flavor, and ripened off the vine in ethylene gas rather than on the plant in sunlight. The homegrown version has more sugar, more acid, and more of the volatile aromatic compounds that make tomato flavor complex and appealing. Grow Sungold, Sweet Million, or Tumbling Tom in any sunny position in a large container or raised bed. Provide a simple stake or cage for support. Water consistently and harvest daily once the crop begins. Number 4 is the blueberry, which produces one of the most naturally baby-friendly fruits in the home garden because of its size, its sweetness when fully ripe, and its extraordinary nutritional density. The blueberry belongs on this list for a reason beyond flavor and nutrition, which is its unique suitability for the baby and toddler growing experience. Blueberries are one of the very few fruits that can be grown in a container on a balcony or patio, require no preparation before eating, are naturally a manageable size for developing motor skills, and produce reliably for decades from the same plant. A blueberry bush planted in a large container this year will produce fruit for your baby as a toddler, for your toddler as a child, and for your child as a teenager, from the same plant that was part of their earliest food memories. That continuity of relationship between a child and a specific food-producing plant has developmental and emotional value that goes well beyond the nutritional contribution of the fruit itself. For container growing, choose a half whiskey barrel or a container of at least 15-gallon capacity filled with a mix of ericaceous compost and pine bark. Choose a variety suited to your climate zone. Water consistently, never allowing the container to fully dry out, and feed monthly through the growing season with an acidic fertilizer. A container blueberry in full production will give a family with a baby or toddler several pounds of fruit per season, and will do so year after year with minimal care. Number 5 is the cucumber, and the cucumber earns its place on this list through a combination of extraordinary ease of growing, prolific production that gives young children the experience of abundance from a single plant, and the particular sensory experience of eating the cucumber picked directly from the vine when it is still cool and firm, and carries the mild, clean, watery freshness that a grocery store cucumber, waxed and refrigerated for days, can never achieve. The coolness and crunch of a fresh cucumber, and the way it releases moisture when bitten, are tactile and flavor experiences that are naturally appealing to babies transitioning to more textured foods, and to toddlers who are developing preferences and opinions about food. Grow cucumbers on a vertical trellis to save space and to keep the fruit clean and accessible. Bush varieties like Bush Pickle or Space Master are ideal for smaller garden spaces and containers. Water consistently, especially during fruit development, and harvest regularly because cucumbers left on the vine past their peak turn bitter and yellow and reduce the plant's production of new fruit. A well-managed cucumber vine produces generously through the summer and can provide a daily supply of fresh cucumbers for a family from a single plant in a raised bed or large container. Number 6 is the raspberry, and the raspberry belongs on this list for the same reason as the strawberry, which is that the gap between a homegrown raspberry and a store-bought raspberry is extraordinary because raspberries are among the most fragile of all commercially grown fruits and are almost never available at genuine peak ripeness in grocery stores. A raspberry that is fully ripe is so soft and delicate that it will not survive more than 24 hours without deteriorating, which means every commercially sold raspberry was picked before it reached its peak flavor and shipped and stored in a compromised state. A homegrown raspberry picked at the moment of perfect ripeness, when it slides off the cane with the lightest touch, has a flavor intensity and a floral complexity that is simply not available in any store at any price. For a baby-focused garden, autumn fruiting raspberry varieties like Autumn Bliss or Heritage are preferable to summer varieties because they produce their crop in September and October when the garden is winding down and other fruits are finished, extending the fresh fruit season and providing a harvest at the time of year when fresh home-produced fruit is most valuable. They also require less management than summer varieties, fruiting on the current year's canes rather than the previous year's, which simplifies the pruning cycle to a single annual cut of all canes to the ground in late winter. Number 7 is the courgette or zucchini. And while courgette may not seem like an obvious choice for a baby-focused food garden, it earns its place here through one specific characteristic that makes it uniquely valuable for families with young children, which is its extraordinary productivity. A single courgette plant in a sunny, well-watered position will produce more vegetable matter than almost any other food plant of equivalent size. And the courgette's mild, adaptable flavor makes it one of the easiest vegetables to incorporate into the purees, soups, and soft foods that form the foundation of early solid food introduction. Grated raw courgette added to baked goods, cooked and pureed into soups, or sliced and roasted until soft are all preparations that introduce this highly nutritious vegetable in forms that babies and toddlers accept readily. And growing your own ensures that the courgette your baby eats was harvested within hours of preparation, rather than days, at a size and ripeness that you control, rather than that a commercial grower optimized for shipping weight. Number 8 is the herb garden, and I am treating the herb garden as a single entry rather than listing individual herbs separately, because the value of herbs in a baby-focused food garden is cumulative rather than specific to any single variety. A baby who grows up in a household where fresh herbs are used daily in cooking, where the smell of basil and the sight of parsley and the texture of sage leaves are familiar from the earliest months of life, develops a flavor vocabulary and a food adventurousness that children raised on processed, uniformly flavored commercial food simply do not have. The research on early flavor exposure is clear that repeated contact with diverse, complex natural flavors in the first 2 years of life significantly expands the range of foods a child accepts willingly as they grow older. Grow a collection of at least 6 herbs in containers or a dedicated raised bed accessible to the kitchen. Basil, mint, parsley, chive, sage, and thyme form a foundational herb collection that covers the full range of culinary flavors, from sweet to savory to pungent. Keep the herb garden within easy reach of both the kitchen and the outdoor play area so that fresh herbs are available for daily cooking and so that the aromatic sensory experience of the herb garden is a regular part of your baby's outdoor time. Building the flavor familiarity that supports adventurous eating throughout childhood. Number 9 is the sweet pepper. And the sweet pepper in a home garden produces a flavor experience so different from the commodity peppers available in grocery stores that it functions almost as a different food entirely. A fully vine-ripened sweet pepper, left on the plant until it has completed its color change from green through yellow to deep red or orange, has a sweetness and complexity that makes it genuinely irresistible eaten raw. And it's firm, Slightly juicy flesh makes it one of the most texturally interesting raw vegetables for toddlers who are developing their chewing ability and their appreciation for foods with interesting physical properties. Grow sweet peppers in the sunniest, most sheltered position available in your garden or in a large container on a south-facing patio. They need warmth and consistent moisture to produce well and are more heat-demanding than most other vegetables on this list. But in a good summer, in a reasonably warm climate, a single sweet pepper plant produces a generous supply of fruit that ripens progressively through late summer and autumn, giving your toddler a steady daily supply of fresh-picked pepper at the peak of its sweetness. Number 10 is the bean, specifically the French bean or green bean, grown as a climbing variety on a simple wigwam of garden canes. And the climbing bean earns its place on this list through its extraordinary ease of growing, combined with one of the most visually and physically engaging harvest experiences available to a toddler in the food garden. The climbing bean produces its pods at a range of heights from ground level to well above adult head height, which means a toddler helping to harvest beans is engaged in a genuinely active, physically varied, cognitively stimulating activity that combines the gross motor development of reaching and stretching with the fine motor development of pod picking and the cognitive engagement of searching for hidden pods among dense foliage. It is one of those garden tasks that functions simultaneously as food production and as rich developmental play. Sow beans directly into the soil at the base of a cane wigwam after the last frost in spring. They germinate quickly, often within 5 to 7 days, which provides the additional developmental benefit of allowing your child to observe the complete germination and growth cycle from seed to harvest within a single season at a speed that is fast enough to be perceptible to a young child. A bean wigwam in the garden is one of the most child-friendly growing structures you can build, providing not just food production, but a living play space that toddlers can crawl into and sit inside surrounded by growing plants. Number 11 is the apple, and specifically a dwarf or patio apple variety grown in a large container or trained as a cordon or fan against a wall, which makes apple growing accessible to garden spaces of any size. The apple belongs on this list, not primarily because of the superiority of homegrown apples over store-bought ones, though a genuinely tree-ripened apple is better than any commercial equivalent, but because of the long developmental relationship between a child and an apple tree, that makes this one of the most valuable food plants you can establish in a family garden. An apple tree planted when a child is a baby will be producing its best crops when that child is old enough to climb into it, to help with harvest, to understand the full annual cycle from blossom to fruit, and to feel the particular pride of ownership that comes from eating fruit from a tree you have known your whole life. Choose a self-fertile variety on a dwarfing rootstock that keeps the tree to a manageable 6 to 8 feet. Eat Me, Scrumptious, and Fiesta are compact, reliably productive, and produce fruit of excellent flavor on small trees that children can harvest from without a ladder. Plant in the sunniest position available in any reasonable soil. Mulch annually with wood chips. Prune lightly in winter to maintain the shape and structure, and then watch your baby grow up alongside their apple tree, both of them becoming more productive and more complex with every passing year. Number 12 is the pumpkin, and the pumpkin closes this list not because it is the most nutritious or the most flavorful of the crops on this list, but because it is the most magical from a child's developmental perspective. A pumpkin seed planted in late spring by a baby who cannot yet walk will produce by October of the same year a fruit that is larger than the child's head in a color that is among the most visually striking produced by any food plant, from a vine that will have traveled 10 feet or more from the seed that was planted in one afternoon in May. The entire arc of that experience, from seed to enormous orange fruit in 5 months, is one of the most developmentally powerful demonstrations of biological growth and seasonal change available to a young child. And the pumpkin's culinary versatility, from roasted flesh to soup to puree to seeds toasted with salt, gives a family with a baby or toddler a single harvest that provides multiple distinct food experiences through autumn and winter. Grow 1 or 2 pumpkin plants in the largest, sunniest, most open space available in your garden because the vines need room to roam. Water generously through fruit development. And harvest in October when the skin has hardened completely and the stem has begun to dry and cork over. Store in a cool, dry place where it will keep for months, providing a supply of homegrown vegetable through the autumn and winter months when the fresh garden is dormant and the particular satisfaction of eating something you grew yourself is most keenly felt. Now here is the framework that ties these 12 crops together into a coherent baby and toddler food garden that works in any space, from a small balcony to a larger backyard. The container garden for families without outdoor ground space can produce a genuinely significant portion of a baby and toddler's fresh food experience from a surprisingly small collection of containers. A half whiskey barrel of blueberries, 2 large pots of strawberries and alpine varieties, a deep container of climbing beans on a compact cane wigwam, a hanging basket of cherry tomatoes, a window box of herbs. This collection of containers on a balcony or patio produces fresh food throughout the growing season from a space no larger than a small parking spot and requires nothing beyond regular watering and occasional feeding. The raised bed garden for families with a small garden area can expand this container collection into a more comprehensive food garden that produces the full range of crops on this list. A single 4-foot by 8-foot raised bed planted with a succession of crops through the season, starting with peas in spring, transitioning to tomatoes, peppers, courgette, and beans through summer, and finishing with autumn raspberries and stored pumpkins, provides fresh homegrown food for a baby and toddler through 8 months of the year, from a bed that costs very little to build and maintain. The larger family garden for families with more space can incorporate all 12 crops on this list, plus the dwarf apple tree, the blueberry bush, and the sensory garden elements from the previous video in this series, creating a complete growing and developmental environment that serves your baby through every stage from newborn to school age and beyond. The food your baby eats in their first years is not just nutrition. It is the foundation of their relationship with food, with flavor, with growing things, and with the living world that produces everything they will ever eat. A baby who has spent their earliest years watching food grow, smelling herbs, tasting fruit from the vine, and helping to harvest with small hands, is building a relationship with food that processed, packaged, commercially produced food can never establish. They are learning where food comes from, not as an abstract fact, but as a lived embodied sensory experience that becomes part of who they are. Drop a comment below and tell me how old your baby is and what growing space you have available. A balcony, a small yard, a larger garden, or something in between. Every space is workable and every age has specific crops that serve it best. Tell me what you have and I will tell you exactly where to start. The system in one sentence. Choose crops that are easy to grow. Produce quickly enough for a young child to witness the full cycle from planting to harvest. Taste dramatically better homegrown than store-bought. And create the kind of direct growing to eating experience that builds a child's relationship with real food from the very first bite.